What is up, everybody? How we doing? How we doing? Hello and welcome to the CRE News Hour. It's a weekly podcast where we come to you live at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to discuss current events and everything commercial real estate. My name, as always, is Henry Eisenstein, and I'm here with my co-host, Rafael Collazo. How you doing?
Great, man. Can't complain. I'm even more excited today because a good buddy of ours is on the call. So
I was going to we have a special guest for all of our viewers today. We have the Industrial King of Canada, Chad Griffiths. How you doing, my friend?
Gents, I'm doing so well. Excited to see you both, fans of both of you and what you guys are doing. So it's an honor to be here. Very excited.
Yeah, naturally. I think we're both big fans of your work as well.
Yeah, we've been in touch. Obviously, we're content creators all in the same community, and it's always good to kind of connect with everyone. And I've known Chad for a couple of years now, and he's been doing great work. And I'm excited to see where our reach gets to. So
likewise.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see what we come up with today, guys. I know we got a lot of articles to get through. Let's see if we can try to run through all of them. Rafael, let's kick it off. Where do you want to start off?
All right. Well, first off, it wouldn't be a podcast without discussing the Federal Reserve and what they're trying to send their policies. But essentially, they met, I believe it was the March 18th and 19th, to discuss what they were going to do regarding the federal funds target rate. As somewhat expected, they did not. They decided to keep the target rate steady. They want to see more meaningful progression towards that 2% inflation rate before they feel comfortable reducing the federal funds target rate to help alleviate some of the pressure on interest rates. They're still somewhat optimistic that they're going to be able to get to the 3 rate cuts before the end of the year, and most likely what people are projecting is going to be a 25 basis point cut. Sometime at some point this year in 3 successive meetings is kind of what people are projecting. But again, until we start seeing some meaningful downward pressure on inflation, we're likely going to remain steady. So again, this just talked about some of the statistics that they found, what was essentially keeping the inflation rate, which would they track different forms of inflation, the core inflation rate, and there's other factors that are involved in other metrics that they follow. But shelter seems to be one that is kind of being stubborn right now. And I'm not sure what the solution to that would be in the long run. But again, in this article, it just kind of highlighted reasoning for what they're trying to do. The fact that obviously that we're still at a very high interest rate environment compared to the last 20 years, which is, affecting a lot of different industries, especially the commercial real estate industry, and how that could potentially impact, other loans that are coming due and et cetera. So it's kind of a repetition of what we follow. We've been following for the last, 6 months. But, I think it's, again, an indication that hopefully, as we continue to move into the year, we'll start seeing some meaningful drop off. And at that point, we'll start seeing some relief in the commercial real estate space. Although I will say, I've been pretty busy the last 3-4 months, so it doesn't seem like there's any sentiment. Business sentiment seems to be pretty positive. So, I'm not, it's definitely better than 2023 as far as a volume standpoint. So, maybe with the additional relief that from the Fed, maybe it supercharges the activity. And I'd love to get your guys' take on the article and, how your guys' businesses are progressing in 24.
Yeah, Chad, I'm curious to get your thoughts. Like, how has this been affecting the Canada industrial markets?
Yeah, it's a great topic. And you invited me on the show, and I don't want to come out with fireworks and guns blazing right off the bat, but I'm going to do it anyways because I got a lot to say on this topic. So not even just Canada, but I follow the U.S. industrial market quite closely as well, because headwinds and tailwinds and all the real estate cliches all flow back and forth between Canada and the U.S. Whatever happens in the U.S. happens in Canada. I think from a monetary and fiscal policy perspective, Jay Powell has no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, because he was the guy who said inflation is transitory. Then we should maybe it's going to be a little bit longer than we thought. Then we should just retire the word inflation or transitory altogether. I don't think Jay Powell has any clue what's going to happen here. And the cynical part of me also thinks that the way that we track inflation is manipulated by whoever is designing the model that goes in there. So you can model the basket of goods that goes into CPI numbers, so what you include. So I don't know about you guys, but everything still seems very expensive to me. Travel, gas, food, rent in many different places is still up. So I think that there's a lot of manipulation on the basket of goods, and then there's also a lot of manipulation in the weighting that gets assigned to all those goods, and that leads to numbers that suit their purpose. I think personally the inflation numbers are much higher than we're being told. And the only reason that we're seeing this pause in interest rates is because we're in an election year. It's going to be a big election year. There's probably some political pressure to try and bring down interest rates, but I don't think inflation is anywhere near under control. So I think that and I would have originally thought that we would see rate cuts this year just because of that political pressure, but I don't think inflation is under control. And if the lever that they're pulling is interest rates, I just don't see those coming down anytime soon.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was going to mention before you started that I think interest rate. I don't even think we'll see a drop this year. Kind of like specifically because of the political landscape. I really don't think. I mean, look, I think we'd all agree that we would love to see some drops here, but just based on where things are, I tend to, I really do agree with you that I think that inflation is definitely not under control by any means of the word. And I really think that we're kind of just going to be sitting pretty until, I think the people really in charge say, yeah, it's finally time to start lowering rates. But right now, I don't think we're going to see any of that anytime soon. Maybe, a smidge after the election is over. I would definitely be curious to see. I honestly think we might go zero. I think we might go with 0 rate cuts for 2024. Even though they keep saying this, because it was like 5, right? Then it was 4. Now it's 3. I think we're going to go 0. I think we're going 0 rate cuts for 2024, and maybe 2025 we might see something depending on what which political party ends up winning it.
Yeah, I'm still shocked by the numbers on the consumer spending side. I mean, it seems like people are just getting deeper into credit card debt just to kind of survive, and so I wonder when that comes to a head, because at the end of the day, I mean, the holding of balances on your credit card, it's essentially usury. I mean, you're having to spend an absorbent amount of money just to pay the interest on it. So at a certain point, I think it's going to come to a head, similar to what you guys are describing. I think inflation is not under control and likely won't be under control until we have a pretty significant issue on the consumer spending side, which doesn't seem to be slowing down, which to me is mind-boggling. But I think the consumerism mentality of a lot of American households is what it is, and not only just consumerism, but just spending to survive. So
what's crazy too is, and the real estate entrepreneur in me, and I've got a lot of debt coming up on different properties in this year and next year. So I definitely would like to see lower interest rates, but having some, even where interest rates are today, isn't a bad thing to reward savers, right? If you were a saver 2 years ago, you might get 1% return, where now you can go buy a T-bill. You could put it in a very risk-free investment and get 4 or 5%. We're starting to at least reward savers, and that hasn't been the case in these historically low interest rate environments. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because consumer spending is crazy, but we should be talking also about consumer savings, and people aren't incentivized to save if interest rates are 1%. You might as well just go and spend. So having some elevated interest rates, well, it goes against what I would personally want with debt maturing. I still think that that's good for people that are savers.
Oh yeah, it's an integral part of the economy. I mean, you have to be able to smooth out the spending, and like you said, if we just continued on this track of just absorbent spending when it comes to the interest rates being as low as they were, it's not sustainable. So we have to have a period of time where you have this cooling, and if that means it lasts 2 years or 3 years, then that's what's required. So it's just kind of biting the bullet and making it happen. So
great point.
Yeah. And so I wanted to have this article on here because obviously, we got Chad, who's like I mentioned, the Industrial King of Canada. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, where, it seems like a lot of the spaces, obviously just by the name of the article, small industrial spaces are in short supply across the U.S. Here's where there are the scarcest. I mean, it was more specifically talking about how, the small bay warehouses is where there's a lot of opportunity. And then, Raphael, if you stop real fast, it literally says in the scroll slightly above, a little bit. Yeah. Where it says here, the 10,000 square foot property sits out Louisville, Kentucky. So I was like, oh, okay, we got, Raphael's, we're shouting you out over here. It's actually one of the one of the country's scarcest markets for available small bay industrial space. So, but it goes on to show that basically small bay industrial space is where it's at. It's got some of the highest demand nationally. You'll see in some, if you scroll down continuously, it'll give you some of the submarkets in which that is the scarcest. And obviously, the larger you go, has a lot more absorption, right? There's a lot more, I guess, a lot more space available. So, anyway, I'm curious to get your thoughts. Is this the same in Canada? Are you experiencing the same tightness, or is it, or have they shifted through different things?
Yeah, this was written by Adrian, who I talk to quite regularly, actually. And this is what he does: is he just researches industrial markets as part of his job. It's everywhere. There is no market that I'm aware of where small bay industrial is facing upward pressure on vacancy rate. So that's Canada, US. They've also, Adrian's also obviously broken this down into certain markets and said that some are hotter than others. But this small bay industrial, which I'm a huge fan of myself, has been relatively fixed. The inventory's been fixed for 30, 40 years. There's a small amount that gets added every year, but with the cost of new construction, that new building that gets built is that much more expensive to build and therefore that much more expensive to lease. So that old small bay industrial that was vintage 1970s, vintage 1980s, it's still very functional. They still have 20-foot ceilings. They still have good loading. They still have office space in there for a tenant that just wants to lease space and they want a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot bay. They don't necessarily need new space, and they certainly don't want to pay the premium to rent it. So this small bay is in very short supply all over North America, and the rates haven't necessarily escalated huge, but they've gone up steadily. And I own some small bay industrial myself. I haven't had a vacancy in 6 years in any of the small bay stuff that I have, other than I had one come up and I leased it. I had 1 month of downtime where I had to do some cosmetic improvements on the space. Aside from that, I haven't had a single vacancy in any of the small bays. And even in my own market, I'd be hard pressed if somebody wanted to lease a space. I'd be hard pressed to find 5 options for them. They might only actually have a single option if they're specific about where they want to be, or they want to be in proximity to a customer or a supplier. It could be even less. So I love this small bay stuff. There's so many reasons to be ultra bullish about it. A guy named Chris Powers in Fort Worth, actually, he's built his entire company around this Class B industrial space that doesn't get the same exposure, doesn't get talked about in the media nearly as much as the large big box distribution space. But I personally love this small bay stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to Louisville, and I actually I didn't know it was number one, but I knew it was one of the scarcest in the country when it came to small bay product. And I operate as somewhat of a generalist, but I've started to niche pretty hard into retail. But again, occasionally I'll do the odd industrial deal here and there, and I've worked with a variety of different tenants that are in that 5 to call it 15,000 square foot range. And if you want to be located in certain parts of town, in particular in our market, it's called Bluegrass Industrial Park. It's the largest industrial park in the state. It happens to be located in Louisville. I mean, the vacancy rate, I went to a meeting where they talked about it's like an annual meeting where the Jeffersontown is the market it's located in. They have an annual meeting to talk about business results and everything else. And at one point last year, I believe the vacancy rate was hovering at 1% or 1.1%, I think it was. So it's unbelievable the amount of demand for this particular location. So if you get a person who's like, hey, I want 3,000 to 5,000 square feet in Bluegrass Industrial Park, you're just like, yeah, good luck. Everyone wants that. So if you want it and it's available, you better go immediately and give the landlord whatever the heck they want, because otherwise you're kind of at the mercy of 5 or 6 other groups that want the same thing. So
I'm curious to get your thoughts on this real quick, guys. So for the larger stuff, right, the larger product, what do you think they can do? What options do they have for these huge, 100,000 plus warehouse, square foot warehouses, that they're hoping and praying for one tenant to come knocking down their door? They're praying Amazon calls them. They're praying, these huge organizations call them and try to lease up a bunch of space. What do you think they should be doing to be a little bit smarter than the rest of the competition?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question that a lot of these companies are asking themselves right now. And there's reluctance for them to demise or partition those into smaller spaces just because the cost of putting up a wall is huge to have it fire rated on both sides. And then you're probably going to have to deal with HVAC issues and additional office space. Like there's all sorts of additional costs that get baked into it as soon as you start splitting the space up. So what I think a lot of these companies are going to do, and for the most part, these are large companies that own the space, like Prologis, the largest industrial owner in the world. It's a huge company. They own 1.2 billion square feet worth of space. So if they're sitting on a million square foot vacancy, it's really not the end of the world because they're leasing out everything else that they have. So I think a lot of these big institutional owners will just be patient. It's interesting because with interest rates having gone up, it's caused a lot of developers to hit the pause button on new projects. So the ones that were already underway, those are still going forward because it's the wheels were already in motion. But a lot of developers hit the pause button on new projects. So if the economy does start coming out of it and we start seeing an uptick in activity, which a lot of people are anticipating 2025, perhaps 2026 at the latest, there could be a potential shortage of these large distribution spaces where the new development pipeline didn't get added to it. So I think what a lot of these large companies will do they'll just be patient and they'll just say this is the cost of doing business. Having some vacancy, will be ready when the market picks up, that will have space ready to go. The challenge is for the groups that don't have that institutional grade backing and they're perhaps sitting on inventory that they need to lease. They need that money to pay payroll and expenses and everything that goes with it. I think that those guys just need to be creative. Perhaps they need to do short-term leases. Perhaps they need to put up an imaginary line instead of actually doing a full partition wall. They can actually just put a chalk line separation and say, okay, well, you get this 20,000 square feet, but you have to appreciate that you can't encroach past that imaginary line there, and just be creative. Try and do anything you can to get cash flow. And I mean, I equate it to any other asset class as well. It's just, if you need cash flow coming in, be open to any possible option that comes out there. And whether it's a brokerage community that's bringing it to you or somebody within your existing portfolio, if you reach out to your tenants and say, do you guys need any extra space, even on a short-term basis? We've got this empty building. I think that there's a lot of ways that guys can be creative, but that big box industrial, for the most part, the landlords are still doing quite well, even though they are seeing an uptick in vacancy.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I'm glad you had that perspective, because obviously I know Henry does a decent amount of industrial on the investment side. You know, I do a little bit, but it's always good to hear feedback from someone whose focal area is strictly industrial. So,
yeah, and Jersey's a funny state, man. It's got so much available larger products. So I'm definitely curious to see who ends up making to chop it up versus who has staying power. But go ahead into the next article, man.
all right. So next up is an article that I think this is an important topic to discuss pertaining to women essentially in real estate, because it is a topic that people don't talk about as much. I mean, we kind of know it to be true, but the commercial real estate industry, the finance industry, construction, and these other verticals tend to be somewhat more male dominated. And I would say in recent years, in particular with the advent of social media, and there's more and more people kind of showcasing their ability in the space, that it's starting to kind of trend towards having more opportunity for people that don't typically fit the mold of the standard individual. So, but still, it is something to kind of just have conversations about, because I think it's important for the industry long term to ensure that we have a more diverse industry. And so in this particular article, it kind of highlights some of the challenges that women face, in particular early on in their career, because as we're aware, a mentorship is obviously a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to staying power in an industry. And they talk about a vacuum in middle management where women tend to get in the industry, stick around for a little while, but they don't have women just above them in middle management or upper management that can kind of be their champion to kind of push them forward into higher piece levels into the organization. And so they kind of highlight some of the reasons why that was the case. They interviewed the president of CRE, that's, I believe, the largest women in commercial real estate organization in the country. to kind of discuss some of the things that are being discussed. Along with that, it kind of highlights different ways that they could potentially bridge the gap. Obviously it's kind of a running joke in the space that, obviously golf's a big thing. A lot of other activities that are typically performed by men, like shooting, etc., tend to be activities that men like to do, but on average, the women don't necessarily enjoy doing these types of things. And so finding ways to include other people that maybe don't have the same level of interest in certain activities, but still have a very strong interest in advancing in the commercial real estate space and ultimately becoming an executive and high leadership within the space is obviously important. And so, just being cognizant of that and trying to foster, creativity and ingenuity and giving opportunities to people that, typically aren't in the space. So it just kind of highlighted this in the article. I thought it'd be an important topic to discuss because, again, it's one that, probably doesn't get as much attention as it needs to. And I will say that because of the advent of social media and more people showcasing what they can do from different backgrounds, colors, and creeds operating in the space, I think it is changing for the better. But again, it's just something that, I'd like to get your guys' take on.
Yeah, I can jump in on this. So I've got
Go for it.
a woman on my team who's arguably one of the best brokers I've ever worked with, and then I've got a number of friends that are women in this industry, and I think they bring something to the table that a lot of men don't have, and that's they can empathize with their tenants better. They're better listeners. They care. Generally, that's a big generalization, but they tend to care a lot more about the outcome and making sure that it's beneficial for everybody, whereas a lot of guy brokers just try to steamroll ahead and try and get everything done, and they want to move on to the next one. Again, big generalization, but that's just one of the things that I've noticed. And the women brokers that I know are exceptional at what they do. They're really good brokers. So I could never pretend to say that I understand the challenges that they're going through, because I had different challenges when I started, and there are differences between being a man and a woman. What I would say, though, is as just a general topic, is that I think a lot of the women that do quit in this business just quit too early, and they might get something waved in front of them, like it might be a leasing job or a property management job, where they go from being in straight commission, where they might not have been making very much money, to now having a steady salary. And these types of agents, men and women alike, get picked off all the time. Once you have 2 or 3 years in this business, there's all sorts of owners and developers and property managers that need help. And if you already have 3 years of industry experience, you can get a decent salary waved in front of you pretty easily. So I think it's everybody. Agents that quit just quit too early. And it's the running cliche that we've probably all told other people, is that you don't make any money in your first 3 to 5 years. It's an absolute grind. You get kicked in the teeth all the time. And really, it's the people that have some element of luck. You need luck in this business. We've I'm sure all been on the receiving end of some good luck and some bad luck, but you need some luck. You need some good timing. You need that stick-to-itiveness, and you need to have that real long-term stand perspective. And there's tons of guys that drop out too early as well. I don't think that's just a woman issue. I think it's just people can't see the light at the end of the tunnel because it might just look so dim, where if they stuck with it and kept going down that metaphorical railroad track, you might see that light a little clearer every day. But that's what I've just noticed, is that it's and again, not saying that I understand what women have to deal with, because there obviously is other things, but I've just noticed men and women alike tend to quit this business too early.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know a few things before I dive into the other aspects of this article, which is the individuals who left, right? The 27% of women who left the field in the last couple of years since 2020. I'm curious of what role or position they held at these companies when they left. I was curious, I'm curious if that was more specific, if they were sales related versus administrative related. Just bluntly curious here, just to get that, because like you had alluded to, Chad, like a lot of people fail out of this industry. A lot of people, right? Like, and maybe they're just, I don't want to just say that they're highlighting specifically, women in this instance, because I think that a lot of people, like you had mentioned, the first few years suck, The first few years in this industry are the hardest. And I am curious, what specific here, the 2020, hold on, you scroll down, it was right there.
Yeah, I don't know if it actually said exactly what the role was, but
yeah, no, I'm just curious here. Jobs in the industry, women in real estate now facing the toughest in the 19 sectors analyzing the world economics, despite making 45% of the workforce, women are the 29% in leadership roles. Women in real estate also suffer the same drop. So meeting representation declines at every step of the career staircase, entry level management C-suite. It doesn't really explain. So I would be very, very curious to understand. Actually, it even says here, departure in the increasingly common story for an industry struggling with the crisis level retention problems, especially among women in early and middle ranks. Okay, early and middle ranks in 2020. So again, I'm assuming, I'm going to assume in this article that they're stating that majority of these women, right, were in sales careers. So like in their first 3 years, it sucks. But the one thing I want to say, like, number one, I hate golf. I suck at it and I hate golf. I'm not a hunter. I don't like hunting. I think it's terrible. Okay. So I can, I'm right there with both of those. I'd like to also say, like, I work from Miami, work from home, right? And I work virtually to New Jersey. A large portion of my business is out of the state of New Jersey. So I am, I am literally doing many actions, right? And have many of the same stances as several women in this industry, right? I work from home. I work from my house, right? I don't really go out and see many clients. I obviously do some networking around here, but I work from home, right? I don't go out and play golf and network that way. I don't go out hunting and all that kind of whatever, they were stating here. And what I have found is that's mostly about if you can find great deals, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, investors will want to do business with you, right? In my coaching program, 30% of the people in the program are women, right? We have, a lot of amazing, strong women in the group. And I think that, it's really about like finding great opportunities. I think, I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I think that if you have the ability to find great opportunities and you can connect sellers and buyers, I think anybody will want to do business with you. Right. And, obviously I have, the aspect where women don't have the same opportunities sucks. Right. Because there's a lot of people who are very old school, been doing things for a very, very long time. I think it's a very bullshit way of doing it. Like, I think this entire industry is, run by dinosaurs, right? Just to be honest with you, right? As a 29-year-old, I'm going to speak freely for a second, right? Like, I think that this industry is run by absolute dinosaurs, and it has been done the same way for the last number of decades. And it's time that things be changed a smidge. And this being one of them, right? So I'm a fan favorite. Obviously, women should have the same opportunities of doing the same thing if you're going to work just as hard, right?
I think seeing it being done, and that's where I think the social media piece is so important, is that you see it being done at a high level by people who are showcasing it on these different mediums. And so, if someone who didn't have any background in commercial real estate and didn't really understand anything about it, if I all of a sudden start following someone on social and they are doing some cool stuff and they're educating and you can kind of relate to them in some way, it kind of gives you an added thing saying, you know what, maybe it's a good opportunity for me. Maybe I'm going to be able to pursue it. And even though you may not have a direct mentor, which again, you're lucky to get a mentor in this business. A lot of times it's like, you eat what you kill, you get out there and figure it out. But your mentor can be someone that you just follow on social media. And it just so happens that they give you inspiration, they give you insights, and then you use your God-given talents to go pursue what you want, right? Because like you said, sales isn't for everyone. But if you have that dogged mentality, if you have that never give up attitude, you're going to make it. It's just going to take you some time. But
yeah. And I also am very familiar with a number of women on the residential side who are just killers, right? They're just absolutely crush it. So, as much as the commercial world is run, quote unquote, run by a boys club, I think the residential world is run by women.
Absolutely. All right. So next up is global head of real estate at Canada's largest pension fund to step down.
Yeah. So Chad, I don't know if you saw this article. Curious to get your thoughts. And this is also just interesting to see who's going to be taking their place. I can't remember who that was taking their place. But a lot of these large pension funds, obviously have been around for a number of years, and there's obviously going through some transitions in regards to who's actually running the show. But the one thing I did find was interesting about this article, which is really the big reason why I bring this up, was the returns on their investments are obviously much lower than I just would have thought. I thought they were very, very interesting. Like if you stop, we're exactly where we are right now. In the very dead center, it says, in February, the CPPIB reported a 3.4% return for the quarter that ended December 31st. Over the last decade, the fund has returned a 9.3% annualized return. I'm not saying 9.3 is bad, but if you actually scroll down lower, which is where I thought it was more interesting, it actually shows that I think the last quarter, keep going. Okay, yeah, Ontario teachers report negative 6 point. There you go. The CDPQ reported a negative 6.2% return on its real estate investments in 2023. Down below, it says Ontario teachers reported its real estate returns were down 5.9% last year. In the healthcare of Ontario professionals, returns dropped 6.5% last year, even as an overall returns climbed to 9.38. So I'm just curious, what is going on? With a lot of these funds, like, are they getting stuck with their hands in the cookie jar with some of these loans to be redone, or what's going on?
I suspect it's a combination of all of that. Yeah, I mean, it's no different than my portfolio. I had to renew a mortgage last year, and it wiped out a considerable portion of my cash flow just by having to take the debt from 3% to, I think that one we ended up renewing just below 7. I mean, you can't take the debt that high and then not see a dramatic change and impact on your cash flow. So I think it probably was that. I suspect, and I don't know this, what they have in their portfolio, but I suspect they have a lot of exposure to office, because that's what a lot of these old funds tended to focus on, was big trophy assets like shopping malls and office towers. And that office market just got absolutely crushed. So if they had to write down any of that debt, or if they decided they wanted to exit some of those positions, there could have been considerable losses there. Like the office market in itself is just, I think it's much worse than anybody is letting on. I think it's really, really bad, especially in the downtown cores. So if they had a big exposure to the office market, they probably saw a lot of pressure on lease renewals, downward pressure on lease rates, probably a lot more vacancy. And then you also add in higher debt costs. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. So the fact that it was only down that amount, and again, I'm not familiar with what's inside their portfolio, but based on what I know about a lot of these pension funds, that's what they had historically focused on. Yeah, it's pain in the forecast, and I think we'll see more of that. I think we'll start seeing that in the real estate investment trust space, more pension funds, more institutional money, anybody that had heavy exposure to the office asset class. As this product gets repriced going forward, it's going to be ugly. I just don't see I don't see an encouraging spot where this gets better in the near future.
Yeah. Well, and with these pension funds too, they're not fully exposed to just real estate. They have, they're diversified amongst a variety of different assets. So, I'm assuming in a situation where the real estate portfolio is underperforming, if they're exposed to bonds and they're exposed to other different investments, it's going to kind of normalize at some point. But you're right. I think in these particular situations with these large pension funds, they kind of typically go for these trophy assets, and historically it's been office product and, major metros, and that's been crippling. I read an article the other day that said that San Francisco's office vacancy was continuing to decline, although some markets you're starting to see more of an uptick as far as people getting back to the office in some capacity. But San Francisco, it seems like the trend is still continuing to decline, which is not great. And it's been one of the most effective cities in the country. So,
well, what's crazy too is that all these pension funds, by design, they're risk adverse, right? They don't want to be chasing home runs. They just want to hit singles and have really steady returns. And that's why a lot of them had pursued the trophy asset, that Class A office building in a vibrant world-class city. Like 5 years ago, that looked like one of the most stable assets you could have. Now, fast forward, none of that risk was actually priced in, because it's like these buildings have gone down considerably in value, where they were buying these specifically because they were supposed to be as risk-free as you could get for real estate. And it turned out there was a tremendous amount of risk that wasn't priced in.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And, it's going to continue to evolve. And I'm sure, in the coming weeks and months, as we continue to have these articles, we're probably going to see similar types of headlines regarding that. So, all right. So next article is finding new investment value in industrial outdoor storage. So I'm excited to get your take on this, Chad. But for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with outside industrial outside storage. So, when we typically describe that, and some manufacturing companies utilize outside storage for their operations, so they'll have an open field or space that they can store materials. But a lot of what we're seeing in our market in particular is truck parking. So with the advent of the internet and the demand that we have for products being delivered immediately, the demand for trucking across the country has increased substantially. And so it kind of talks about the dilemma that a lot of people face in major cities regarding parking for trucks. And so it looks like here that spaces multiply well beyond the 2019's truck to parking ratio, when there was 900 light duty trucks registered per commercial parking spot. So that's an unbelievable vacuum in actual, what's available for trucks to be able to actually park. So it says this congestion has led to a record $95 billion in financial losses, an uptick in demand for industrial, and obviously an uptick in demand for industrial outdoor facilities. In the Northeast, 8 of the 10 most impacted states are in those areas, probably because the land area is just not there. So you really don't have the opportunity to be able to do that. Also, restrictive zoning is causing a lot of issues with, having more available outside storage. A lot of municipalities don't want to see those types of uses in their city, because having a multifamily use or a retail use from a tax-based standpoint is more beneficial for the city. Plus, it's a little bit more sexy, and it's for these types of projects. Again, a lot of people don't want to be living or locating next to truck parking, although it is very highly sought after. So, that just kind of describes some of the opportunities and ways that people can, modify or leverage their property to be able to fill this demand, because again, it is a significant demand. So I figured I'd, kind of open up to you guys to kind of get your take on what your thoughts are on industrial outside storage.
Yeah, it's so funny because this term really only came around in the last 5 years. We didn't even hear industrial outside storage. So whoever coined that term and had to become part of everyday vernacular, I tip my hat, because we used to just call it yard space or a parking lot, really. So whoever came up with this industrial outdoor storage was ahead of their time. So I'm actively looking for this myself. I would love to add some yard storage to my portfolio for a number of reasons. You don't have to have a building on there, so you're not worrying about depreciating assets and maintenance and things going wrong and all the issues that just come with a normal building. So there's a lot of reasons to be very optimistic about iOS. But what I'd really caution people about is that this could almost be like a modern day gold rush, where everyone sees that there's 900 vehicles for every one parking spot. And they're like, this is crazy imbalance between supply and demand, and everyone rushes out to do it. It's still, if you're renting out to truckers anyways, it's still an operating business, because if you can put 50 trucks onto a parcel of land, that's 50 individual tenants that you now need to deal with, each of them probably on a short-term lease basis. So I always look at real estate on a spectrum. If you're at one end, you're going to have like a hotel where you're turning over guests nightly. And on the other end, you might have a triple net building with a government tenant where you don't do anything. And that's a long-term lease. It's hands off. That spectrum also involves shows how much management is involved in it. A hotel, you need an entire team to run a hotel. If you're doing truck storage, that's pretty close to that far end of the spectrum, where now it's an operating business where you need to constantly be finding these tenants, constantly be working with them and letting them have access and dealing with issues that come up. And I know people that have these truck yards. One trucker hits another truck, or one trucker is encroached a little bit on the other person's space, and now you've got a management issue you need to deal with. It goes from being a really hands-off real estate investment, as much as you can anyways, to now you have to actively manage it. And it might be something you're dealing with daily. And I think that's, for myself personally anyways, that's the opposite of what I want. I want to get an asset. I want to stabilize it. Have a management team in place that isn't burdened with daily calls dealing with truckers and having to turn them over all the time and collect rent and worry about all the things that go with it. I would rather get a parcel of land and rent it out to a company that needs long-term storage for equipment, or they've got a fleet of vehicles and it's one tenant that I deal with and I've got a long-term lease with it and I'm not dealing with those day-to-day issues. That's what I'm more attracted to. But if somebody does have the appetite and they can deal with all this day-to-day minutia that comes up, then all the power to them. But I would just caution anybody that isn't going into this eyes wide open that truck parking becomes a lot more of a job than a real estate investment.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. When you get down to that, I think there's a lot of opportunity. Like look, northern New Jersey, right? As probably being one of those 8 states in the Northeast, New Jersey. There's a lot of people looking for truck parking in many different major cities outside of Manhattan, and the land has gotten ridiculous. I mean, just stupid in pricing, and it's kind of insanity. Like when you hear some of these pricing, I was like 10 years ago, like you were saying, Chad, when this wasn't a thing, it was like, you get dirt here for like $200,000 an acre. And now they're like $3 million, $7 million per acre. It's like ridiculous. But what I've seen up in North New Jersey is that they're looking for larger tenants to basically rent the park, right? Or the truck parking, right? As you get one tenant to pay you $50,000 a month to park all their trucks across whatever the lot size is, right? So that's where I see a lot of value is that, if you can try to sneak, we're trying to find actually some good opportunities for a few property owners right now. These guys have, this one guy's got 11 acres in a really, really great area near the ports in New Jersey. He's been offered $100 million for 11 acres. And, which is just ridiculous. I mean, this is, by the way, 10 years ago, you wouldn't even know anything. You know what I mean? Like, I think he probably paid $2 million for it. And but just not right place, right time kind of thing. It kind of was, seeing things before his time, and just a huge opportunity. And if you can try to snag some decent land in the right areas and you get the right type of tenancy, but the people who try to do truck by truck by truck by truck, I think it is just not my cup of tea by any means.
No, and I relatively recently, in the last 2 years, we looked at a property that there was a gentleman who operated his business on site, had additional land that he gravelled out, and then he leased it out to Shamrock, like the milk company, or I don't know if you're familiar with Shamrock, but he rented it out to them, and they had, I think, 30 or 40 trucks. What's up?
The leprechauns. That's all I can think.
Yeah, they had the 4-leaf clover and everything. Yeah. So he rented out to them, and he had his building and business that he was operating, and then he had additional income coming in from these people because he had extra acreage and he wasn't using it. So could be a novel idea to be able to kind of capitalize on. And again, I work a lot with business owners, and even now I'm looking for sites where they can operate their business on site and then find ways to generate additional income for them to cover some mortgage expenses. So just another idea to explore, because again, I think you make money with creativity oftentimes, especially in this environment where everything's just so competitive.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Agreed.
All right, I'm actually going to pull up Chad's article because I'd like to get his take on this. Oh, wait, sorry, that was not the right article.
Oh no, that's the one.
Oh, is it? Oh, it was. I'm sorry. Okay, perfect.
This is a crazy article. It just came out a couple days ago. But what they were talking about, and there's multiple issues at play here. It's not even just one topic. They put a whole bunch of things in the same topic. So the one big one that I see is that the Environmental Protection Agency is proposing, and I don't know the implications of this on whether it gets passed into law or whether this has to go through Congress and Senate and then get approved. I don't know how far this goes, but this is similar to what other countries are doing as well, where they're trying to put in regulations that vehicles going forward cannot have any tailpipe emissions. So there's, in the article here, it says that the EPA wants to have the majority of vehicles by 2032, which is 8 years. It's not even that long of a time. The majority of vehicles by 2032 to only be hybrid or EV. That has crazy implications. My wife and I have 3 vehicles total. All 3 of them are internal combustion engines. And to think that those aren't even going to be allowed to be made in 8 years is a crazy thought. But the implications of this, and we've already seen it over the last 5 to 10 years now, is this massive run up in EV space. There's some big projects underway. There's probably some close to anybody listening to this right now. There's probably a major EV plant going up close to you, because the CHIPS Act in the US, multi-billion dollar incentive plan that the government rolled out, basically to just encourage developments of all types. So that's led to big semiconductor plants, which they talk about in here. Intel's committing to $100 billion of facility upgrades in the upcoming year. TSCM is working on a massive project just outside of Phoenix. Like the amount of money that's going into EVs, battery tech, and semiconductors is mind-boggling. So it kind of all follows a part of what the onshoring and reshoring trend that we've seen recently as well, where just a lot of manufacturing is being attracted and incentivized to come back to North America. So I'm anticipating that the manufacturing space is going to have a boom over the next decade, unlike anything we've seen before, just because of the amount of money that goes into these major projects will also require a whole string domino effect of other companies that will be required to maintain all of this stuff. So a big $40 billion factory goes up. Well, now you need someone to maintain all the HVAC units. You need someone to maintain all the electrical components, the plumbing components, everything that would just go with that building. It requires so much more industry as a result of it. So I'm thinking that we're going to see on top of what's already been there, just a big manufacturing boom over the next decade.
So I have a lot to say, but I'll be fast about it, which is in the newest book, Tony Robbins talks about, Tony Robbins' new book, like the alternative investment book. It's like the holy grail of investing. He talks about specifically where the idea with the EPA and the freaking government and so many of these different organizations are talking about how we need to be, clean energy, and we're transitioning over to EVs in this period of time. Like, people don't even realize that, the amount of mining that has to occur globally to even make a battery. It's like I think the number was like 500,000 pounds of dirt has to be displaced per 1,000-pound battery, right? And it's like the amount of machinery, or manufacturing or mining or like all this type of stuff that occurs, right? Like the amount of pollution that comes from even trying to get to EVs. It's like these people have no freaking idea. Like, they're not doing the right math, right? They're not even focused on the right metrics. Like, we appreciate that you want to have clean energy. I think everyone can agree we want to be moving towards clean energy. But to just say these stupid, ridiculous statements that all cars have to be EVs by 2032, or we can't have combustion engine cars but anytime after, like, it's just complete idiocy, right? It makes absolutely no sense. And it's like, we can't ever get there, right? Like, and in the book, it even talks about how we've used more coal, we've used more gas, we've used more oil, we used more electricity, we've used all these different material, or whatever we call that, right? Like, we use more of all of that, right, for energy purposes every year since, like, forever. We've only gone more in every aspect. Again, more coal, more oil, more all of it. And even we're in 2024. We're using more coal, more oil today than we were 10 years ago. And we're trying to get cleaner to EVs and cleaner energy, right? Like, wind and solar is only 3 or 4% of the entire global, market in regards to energy. So it's like, it is complete idiocy for them to think that we're going to be able to get there when we are. We all like the idea. I think this is just bullshit headlines, to be honest with you, that they're trying to be greener. I agree 100% that I think we're going to see a major boom in the manufacturing and grabbing all the jobs and bringing them back to the good US of A. And bring them back to North America. I think we're going to see that for quite some time to come. But I just think it's funny when they keep trying to say, like, oh, we are demanding that there will be no more combustion engine car. Man, I'm going to drive my damn Ferrari anytime I want, and will not be electric. I can tell you that.
It's such a good point, man. And I am with you. I've said so many times now that EV technology and solar technology is not green. It might be a little bit cleaner. There's probably an argument there that once you actually check out the math and you give out a long enough time horizon that if you run it for 20 years, then maybe there's a break-even point. But they always fail to include all the, like you mentioned, the mining up front. You have to get the lithium. There's lithium's in third world countries where they have slave labor and child labor. That's
literally talking about Africa. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, and all just the industrialization that's required to get the minerals and the raw materials and get everything, and then you have to transport it, and then you have to manufacture it. But that's a carbon intensive process in itself, which they're trying to eradicate. All the carbon that's required to get that solar panel or that battery to where it is, then you have the useful life of that battery, and then it just becomes toxic industrial waste. And they don't talk about any of that. They don't talk about the bookends of clean energy. They just talk about, well, this is clean energy. We're using the sun's energy to generate electricity through solar. Well, maybe, but you're all the stuff beforehand, all the stuff in the middle, at the end, and then all the maintenance, all the requirements on it. And then does it actually even last that long? I'm with you. I'm very skeptical on it as well.
And to your guys' point, where do you think the energy comes from that so if you plug in a light right now, where do you what do you think is actually generating the energy on a grand scale? Like Henry was saying, like a very small percentage of energy on the grid is produced by renewable means. The vast majority, and it's like not even close, is produced by coal. Because I know this because in Eastern Kentucky, that's kind of coal territory. So it's coal, and then obviously fossil fuels. So it's, just because you have the access to plug your renewable car into your outlet, that energy that is being produced by non-renewable means. Now, I'm of the mindset similar to you guys that we need to have a plan of attack to get eventually to a carbon neutral state, but the acceleration of that in an 8-year period is unrealistic. And I think that's kind of what we're describing. And the impact that's going to have on the broader landscape can be affected. So, again,
it literally talks about in the book, like you had mentioned, for the mining. Okay. And I don't want to get morbid, but he talks about the slave labor in Africa, where the individuals get paid so little money to build these people's freaking lithium batteries. Okay. I'm not talking about any specific type of car company here, but I'm just saying to build lithium batteries, to mine out lithium and cobalt and all these other things that they need in order to build these batteries, that all these people want to be so green and they want to drive around in their freaking EV cars. Okay. Do you understand? Like, these people who are mining your freaking minerals to build your damn EV car don't even have power. They have no power. Their villages have no energy. It's ridiculous. Like, it's sad to read about this type of stuff, but that's the facts. So it's like, when these these people are doing it, they're doing it for political reasons. It's not for actual sustainability, like we keep driving home here. It's all for the wrong reasons. It's literally probably for votes. It's for BS, for people to, be elected, all that kind of crap. It has absolutely nothing to do with the reality of what is actually good for the world. Period.
Well said. That's a mic drop moment right there. I'm gonna have to read that book by Tony Robbins. I've read a lot of his other ones, but I haven't read that one. So
all about alternative investments, which we were talking about beforehand, but just a fantastic read.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you think we have time for one more, or do you want to,
Let's go one more. Let's go
one more. Okay.
We're having fun.
It's good dialogue. Great dialogue.
Right. I love it.
We're gonna have all the greenies coming after us and sending us hate mail.
I know.
Please,
but again, I think it's fair to say we all agree that we need to eventually get to carbon neutral. It's just the means by which we get there needs to be thought through, because I think it's not realistic what we're trying to propose. So
absolutely, we should all be somewhat agnostic on where energy comes from, right? Like, it doesn't really matter. You're not harnessing that energy yourself and storing it for later. You just need your light bulb to turn on, or you need your computer to turn on, you need your car to go. I really couldn't care less how that's powered, but it needs to actually be powered. And to have all this misinformation and lies and deception and greenwashing and everything comes with it, it's disingenuous. So that's my whole problem with it, is if EV technology was as clean as they suggest that it is, and we didn't have any issues, I couldn't care less whether it's a internal combustion or an EV. I just need to get from point A to B. But it's all the misinformation and media bias, and like you said, the just political agendas that's driving this narrative that it just isn't helpful, because it's just not true.
Absolutely.
100%.
All right.
Well,
So
look,
next up,
to finish this off,
final article.
yeah, to finish this off, I had a couple office articles. So you got this one here, which is, this is talking about, if you scroll down real fast. So this is a very interesting thing. I'm very curious to get your both of your opinions. Okay, right here, just stay right here. Perfect. So this is talking about how this individual who wrote the article, which honestly I don't know their name, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say that this points out is that, do we believe, because retail and office have been pretty much in tandem for most of the previous recessions, right? You can see here the green being retail, yellow being office, okay? That for the most part, okay, over the last, since 2008, okay, so this goes back to 2008, we have been in tandem for the most part, office and retail, up until right before the pandemic. And then obviously pandemic made things basically everything's equal. And now retail's bounced back for a lot of the, in a lot of different ways. Okay. Like, don't get me wrong. We can argue shopping malls and shopping centers that, the huge multi-100,000 square feet, spaces are possibly getting hurt. Sure. And at the same time, I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do you think there is any light at the end of the tunnel for office, or are we done so? Are we heading towards demolishing every office building nationally and just changing the way we've always been doing things? What do you think's going to happen? I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll jump in first, Raphael. You can add in anything else after. I think retail, it was kind of similar to the industrial side, where we were pausing all this big box developments right now. So we might run into an issue where there's a supply imbalance in a couple of years. I think that's what's happened in retail, where the e-commerce started taking so much market share. A lot of retail developers tapped the brakes and just said, well, we're not going to add inventory in a market that's declining. So I think retail went through a period where they were just underdeveloping. And you're right on the mall side. I don't know what happens on that mall side, but myself personally and my family, you still go to shopping centers, right? Whether it's a strip mall or just a neighborhood community center, because you want to get groceries. There's still something about being in a grocery store and seeing it versus just having it delivered to your door. If you're getting haircuts or seeing a dentist or whatever it is, there's still a healthy appetite for retail centers. So I think that's a great space. I'd actually consider investing in a retail strip center like that right now, just because it looks to be in balance, that there's still a healthy amount of demand. I don't know about the big box retailers, that I don't know, but I call it a retail strip center with 2,000 square foot tenants in there, and you've got a diverse tenant mix. That'd be something I'd be interested in. Probably as an LP. I don't think I'd want to spearhead that myself, but I can see the appeal on that. On office, I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel on this. I don't. We're 4 years now since we were going through this fiasco in early 2020, and people still aren't going back to the office. There's no reason right now that anybody cannot go back to the office like we actually had restrictions 4 years ago. Everything's back open, the world's back open, and there's still a large percentage of the workforce that does not want to go back. And part of it is that technology's enabled them to do a good portion of their work from home. I think an argument could be made that they may or may not be as efficient, and their team culture and office morale and all that's a separate argument. But a good portion of their work can be done from home now, and they got used to it, and the technology is enabling them to do it, and they just don't want to go back. And I've said this before too. If your job before the pandemic was driving 45 minutes to an hour in rush hour, going into a parkade, going up an elevator, going to sit in a dark cubicle where you didn't, especially the introverted people, where they don't even want to talk to people. They just put headphones on and they don't want to talk to people. And you're in this stuffy environment, and then you have to do it all in reverse, and you get home. Or you can just work from home. You don't have to do 2 hours of commuting and stressful traffic. You don't have to do any of the things that are requirements in the office. Well, of course, that person's going to want to work from home. What's the appeal to have them come back? And I think that's a trend now. Like, we can safely say that there's a large portion of the workforce that does not want to go back. And if most real estate markets are very sensitive to even small changes in demand. Like if the demand changed by like 3 or 4%, that could have catastrophic impact on the other side of that lever. We're now facing a scenario where a lot of cities, 50% of the people aren't even going back to the office. This is well after the pandemic. So I don't think we're anywhere close to seeing how bad this can get. I could be way off. But my crystal ball is as murky as anyone's. But I just think that people do not want to come back. Companies are going to allow a lot of people to continue working from home once more and more companies start rolling over their leases. But that's the other thing as well, is a lot of these companies are on 5 to 10 year leases. If they signed a lease in 2019, that lease is now coming up. If they signed a 10-year lease, that's not going to come up until 2030. So we can still see another 5 to 6 years before this really unfolds. And my personal thought is that a lot of these non-Class A new office buildings, which are still doing fine, Class B, Class C, especially in a downtown core, I think they're going to get crushed.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's kind of a sentiment for a lot of people in the office market. On the retail side, obviously, I think what's the evolution of retail over the last, call it 5 to 10 years, and even before that, is the shrinking of a footprint. But again, retailers are still very active. People are getting out on a day-to-day to actually go to these different places. You know, I work a lot with different franchises on the retail side, and they're as hungry as ever to find space. So I don't think that the demand has ever really waned. It's just what is the evolution of retail. It's similar to what has happened in the industrial market, and it's going to have to happen in the office market, although in the office market it's going to be much more pronounced and probably more painful than we've seen, you know, as far as gradual progression. So, you know, again, I think that's kind of the way that it's going to be, and it is what it is, you know.
Yeah, I'm on the same side as both you guys. Actually, I think that office will never be the same again. I think I don't think that there will be ever anywhere near, like, it's like funny when people are even saying like they're developing properties for mixed use. Like I've been talking to people and they're like, oh, well, you know, I'm building a mixed use building with retail and then office above. Like, I don't know why you have any interest in doing so. It actually blows my mind. And I think that there's going to be a lot of conversions coming up again, obviously, which is difficult because office is also one of the most complex conversions of any type of asset class, right? You know, a multi-story office building, you know, Class A, beautiful, whatever. It's very difficult to freaking convert it into anything useful, right? Other than maybe a data center that goes straight up, but it's just completely, you know, it's a pain in the butt to do it. You know, it's like ceilings aren't high enough to do much. Like, even if you're going to do self-storage, it's just like you're going to be spending almost the equal cost to rebuilding a building to convert it. So it's like everyone keeps talking about conversions. I don't see it as it being anywhere near what that's going to be. I think that townships are really going to have to get involved, you know, setting up pilots, setting up, you know, opportunities for people to, you know, really want to develop or redevelop these types of buildings instead of just having a majorly vacant building all over the place, because that's exactly what's occurring right now. So I'm with you guys. I think death to office. You know, I'll be the first one to say it, death to office here. It's coming soon, and we can all see the writing on the wall. So, well, listen, other than that, guys, I think this was one of the best shows we've had in a long time. Thank you for being on, Chad. This was fantastic. Love to have you on again.
Loved it.
This was a lot of fun to have you. And we've had, I mean, a ton of people typing away in the chat. You know, Tom's been agreeing with a lot of things that we've had to say here. He agrees with the demolition to office. I appreciate that. Well, listen, other than that, guys, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you as always. And other than that, we'll see you guys next Wednesday. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having me on again, guys. Loved it. Great time.
You guys.
Likewise.
See you guys.